I want to thank the senator from Iowa for yielding to me. And let me just take a moment, Mr. President, to really what I want to do is express my deep frustration that we're here with what is about to happen on the Senate floor, because we're talking past each other. We've got a system, we've got a series of votes designed to all fail. We're going to accomplish nothing. That's what we're making sure of tonight. And it doesn't have to be this way. This is what is so maddening about this. I'll give you just one aspect of this briefly. Is the background check legislation we're going to vote on is the version that goes further than the bipartisan compromise that Senator Manchin and I worked out a couple of years ago. What are the chances that that's going to pass? I would say pretty close to zero. And we know that. If we're going to have a vote on background checks, it ought to be the only bill that I am aware of that's in recent time that's had bipartisan support. It may not pass, I understand that, but at least it would have a chance. But we're not even going to have that vote. Let's talk about the other big controversial issue that we're going to vote on, and we already know the outcome of this vote, Mr. President. And that's about terrorists and whether or not terrorists can buy guns and what we do about this. So let me start with what ought to be a pretty simple goal that we ought to be able to agree on. Number one, terrorists shouldn't be able to buy guns legally. That shouldn't be terribly controversial. But it also shouldn't be controversial that if an innocent American is denied his or her right to buy a gun because they're alleged to be a terrorist, they ought to have an opportunity to clear their name. Because guess what? Governments make mistakes. The federal government makes mistakes all the time. The mere fact that they have a list almost guarantees that somebody's on that list wrongly. That's not a reason to do nothing, but it's a reason that you have to have a meaningful process whereby people could challenge their status of the list. Well, the bills we're going to vote on tonight, I think, have serious flaws. First, the Feinstein Amendment. There's no due process at all, nothing to speak of. Think about the way this is designed, the way this bill is designed. And by the way, we've already had this vote, and it failed overwhelmingly. But under the Feinstein approach, the Attorney General can put anyone he or she wants on the list. There's no judicial review. There's no kind of review. She can create the criteria. She creates her list. And now all of a sudden, anyone on that list is denied the opportunity to buy a gun. Now, they will argue, proponents will argue, that there's an opportunity for the gun buyer. But the problem is that person has to go to court. The burden is on the buyer to prove his innocence, and he doesn't even get to see the evidence. How can you possibly prove the evidence against you is flawed if you're not allowed to see the evidence? So clearly, that is not a serious attempt to give someone who's wrongfully placed on the list the chance to clear his name. The Cornyn approach. Cornyn approach is better than what we have now, because it creates a new tool. It provides a new tool that the AG does not have, the Attorney General doesn't have, and that is a 3-day period during which the Attorney General would have an opportunity to make and win a case. Now, I think that's a difficult thing for an Attorney General to do, and I have suggested that this legislation is flawed because of that. It's better than what we have now, but it's probably not enough in many circumstances, which is why we shouldn't be just talking past each other and re-voting things we know are going to fail. I've got legislation. Senator Collins is working on legislation. And what we both have tried to do with different mechanisms is to make sure that a terrorist can't buy a gun legally, but also make sure that the people on the list are put there properly. And if there's a mistake, a law-abiding American citizen has a reasonable opportunity to litigate that, to get his or her name off the list. And my approach, the Attorney General can come up with the list, but it has to be vetted by a court. And if someone is not on the list, there's an emergency mechanism available to the Attorney General that would block the sale if the Attorney General says so, and then provide a reasonable and manageable amount of time during which this could be litigated. In other words, if the buyer says, wait a minute, I'm not the John Smith you think I am, I shouldn't be denied my Second Amendment right. Under my approach, and I believe under Senator Collins' approach, that innocent American would have a chance to have his or her day in court, which is denied under the Feinstein approach. But the bottom line is, We know the Feinstein bill is going to fail. We know the Cornyn bill is going to fail. They're both going to fail tonight. There's nobody disputes that. Why aren't we working on something that could actually get done? Something that actually would stop terrorists from being able to legally buy guns and would at the same time give a law-abiding American the opportunity to clear his name if he's wrongfully put on the list. That's what we ought to be doing here. I'm not saying that I've got the only way to get this accomplished. I think Senator Collins' legislation is going to be unveiled soon, and I know she's been working on this very constructively with a group of folks. But one or the other of these approach, either the Collins approach or mine, needs to get a vote in this body, because it's the only kind of approach that really is a serious way to balance these two important priorities and has a chance to earn bipartisan support. I yield the floor.